Hi everyone, my name is Adeline and I oversee the Gardener Shop. Welcome to our first Shop Artist Talk of 2021. You will notice your mics and videos are muted and the chat option has been disabled. However, there will be a question and answer following today's conversation, and so we invite you to send us questions through the Q&A function at any point. Please note that this program is being recorded and closed captioning is enabled. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that Toronto is located on the treaty lands and ancestral territory of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, the Petun, and the Mississaugas of the Credit Nation. The community we work in is a home to many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to learn and live on this land. Today, I'm excited to welcome fellow artists Claire, Aneela, and Hana, hosted by Barbara Banfield, ceramist and founder of the Fusion Creative Directions Program. I will now turn off my video and mic and hand it over to Barbara.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. I'm so glad you've had the time to take out of your busy day to join us. This is the first of two artist talks that we hope will give you some insight into the exhibition Cultivate, currently online and now on display in the Gardener's Shop. Each of the artists you will meet today either participated in a creative directions program or the mentorship that was delivered through Fusion, the Ontario Clay and Glass Association. Each of these artists, about more than 10 years ago, I had graduated from Sheridan College in ceramics, and I was working away in my studio, and I realized how much I missed my colleagues. I missed the community that had supported me for so long at school. I joined the Fusion board, I joined guilds, but really what I felt was missing were those honest critiques and the feedback, and those things that really gave you inspiration and often stimulated your thinking. So with the incredible support of Fusion, the Ontario Arts Council, and many other arts organizations and individuals, we were able to design and deliver the first mentorship program back in 2011. In the last decade, Fusion has delivered 7 mentorships and 3 creative directions programs. Basically what happens is an individual applies and to be part of a group and commits to work over a period of about a year to a year and a half with the intention of either refining a body of work that might be in its infancy or completely forging new directions. What is often generated by these artists who take this commitment and engage in the creative journey leads to be strong work that is extremely exciting, much like you see in the exhibition Cultivate. The mentor that guided this group, Angelo di Petta, is an artist himself and a renowned teacher who began his career in 1975 at OCAD. Not only is he accomplished in his own right, but he has the ability and the unique style of being able to sort of draw out of others what sometimes they can't see within themselves. He also challenges, and he also makes them work very hard. Today, we are extremely excited to have 2 artists that have recently completed the Fusion Creative Directions program with Angelo. We have Claire Nicole Waddick and Aneela Diaz-Zuza, as well as Hana Balaban-Pommier, who was the recent featured artist in Gardener Shop. Hana was in the very first mentorship that was back in 2011 with Angelo. She will give us some insight as to how the time back in 2011 has really maybe perhaps influenced the path that she took over the last 10 years. Each of these individual artists will share a presentation about their work, how it came to fruition, and we hope that over this, as well as Hana will give us some insight as to how what started over 10 years ago has impacted her creative journey. So here we go, enjoy. If you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A function and we'll address them at the end. I'm handing it over to Claire.
Hello, my name is Claire Nicole Waddick, and I'm just going to set up a share screen so that you can see my presentation. Here we go. The work that I created for the Cultivation show is called Hill and Dale Dinnerware. The journey to create this series was not a straight path. My post-secondary education began in industrial design, veered into art history and cultural studies, then ended with a studio program in painting and drawing. My knowledge of ceramics comes from taking workshops, doing lots of reading, and plain old trial and error. When I started making ceramics, I began with functional ware, then made sculpture, and later returned to making functional ware again. All of these experiences contributed to my current work. Hill and Dale dinnerware is inspired by the farmlands of the Waterloo region where I live. The forms of the dinnerware come from the gentle hills and valleys of this area. Dale is just another word for valley. The colors and textures are from the crops, the trees, and the skies. For me, developing my own body of work and my own distinct voice has simply been a process of trying new things, filtering out the winners, and then refining them into something better. Repeat, repeat again, and so on. The mentorship program accelerated this process. To illustrate how I arrived at the spot where I could create the Hill and Dale Dinnerware series, I would like to share with you some milestones in my art career. I was a painter long before I was a potter. I began exhibiting my paintings in 1995. My appreciation of color harmony comes from painting. I didn't learn how to use the pottery wheel until 2010. In 2011, I had a 1-month artist residency at Medalta, a ceramic center in Medicine Hat in Southwest Alberta. On some of the weekends, I traveled to Saskatchewan and camped out. One of the places I visited was the nature conservancy called Old Man on His Back. This is formerly the home of writer Sharon Butala. The photos from this trip inspired a number of paintings and a new series of pottery I called Grasslands. They were all exhibited together in my first solo show called Solace that was at the Carnegie Gallery in Dundas, Ontario. I started making sculptures with clay for a number of reasons. I found it easier to make abstract expressions with sculpture than with paint. I would always end up falling back into doing representational images when I was painting. With sculpture, I could work intuitively and get lost in the moment, whereas with painting, for me at least, it required planning. I found it deeply satisfying to make an object that could be viewed from all sides, and I enjoyed the challenge of creating compositions that connected across different viewpoints. Land-plant amalgam was in my show called Gradations at the Cambridge Centre for the Arts. Escoma was in my show called Strata at the Homer Watson House and Gallery. These sculptures are based on the forms found in lichen and in the terrain of the prairies. An escoma is the fruiting part of lichen from which spores are released. Strangely, the lessons that I learned when I was an industrial design student about car design helped me to make these sculptures that were inspired by nature. I had learned how to make a 3D form where the highlights and shadows could convey a message of speed or luxury. With my sculptures, I use the highlights and shadows to communicate harmony and growth. My most ambitious project to date was an outdoor sculpture installation at the Button Factory Community Arts Center in Waterloo. I had made 2-part molds when I was a design student, but this project required multi-part molds. Thankfully, I had the assistance of sculptor L.T. Doherty with making these molds. The mold making experience for these sculptures gave me the confidence to tackle molds for an entire series of dinnerware during the mentorship. For 2 years, starting in 2015, I was an artist in residence at the London Clay Arts Centre. During this time, I made a lot more functional ware than I'd ever made before, largely because I was teaching classes there, and this is what a lot of the students wanted to learn. I did a lot of experimenting with different hand building techniques and making functional ware, as well as surface decoration techniques using colored slips. The colors in the Sky Jar series were inspired by rain clouds, and this loose application style was something that I was really pleased with and I wanted to use again. It was my experience as a painter and as a sculptor that made it possible to create the Sky Jar series. This series taught me to value the visual power of expressive brushstrokes and a limited color palette on a simple form with undulating curves, a lesson I applied to making the Hill and Dale dinnerware years later. The process of creating a body of work that is new requires lots of experimentation to find out what works and what doesn't. Creating the Hill and Dale dinnerware began with doing many tests of colored slips to get the right color palette. This is a fraction of the tests that I did. I also did many tests of different glazes to find what worked best with the clay I was using. On the left are line blends that show the gradations of color that can be mixed from 2 colors. On the right are triaxial blends that show the gradations of color that can be mixed from 3 colors. Creating colors in ceramics is not straightforward. The colors are created by combining stains and oxides, but each stain and oxide can have a very different tinting strength. Plus, colors can change based on the chemistry of the glazes that they are used with and the type of clay. My early versions of Hill and Dale dinnerware included 3 color fields on each dish. The center of the dish represented land. It was surrounded by an undulating color band for the trees, and the outer band was for the sky. I ended up rejecting this because I found it was too visually complicated. Plus, once food was put into the dish or the dishes were stacked, much of the design would be hidden. Instead, I decided that the land, trees, and sky could be represented separately on individual dishes. The imagery of land, trees, and sky could be created by stacking the dishes. In this intermediate version of Hill and Dale dinnerware, I added texture to the entire inner surface of the plates and left gaps in the color to reveal the red clay, similar to how plants emerge from the soil in the spring. I also added an iron wash to create more contrast. Aesthetically, I ended up finding I didn't like this. It had too much contrast, and there were some functional problems too. When the dishes were in the dishwasher, it was really hard to tell if the dishes were clean or dirty. And the texture surface made it difficult to scrape a plate clean. So the lesson I learned was it's really important to test your new functional ware in your kitchen. This is the quote final version of Hill and Dale dinnerware. I'm sure there'll be more developments in the future. The texture is only on the outer edges of the dishes, not across the entire surface. There are 4 colorways, and each one is made with 3 different colors of slip. Here's a summary of the making process. I began actually on the computer by drafting the shapes for the dishes. This is the 3rd iteration that you see here. And then I made ribs to match those profiles. I formed a solid clay model of each dish upside down on the potter's wheel using my custom ribs. And then I added the feet that I had made in sprig molds. I made a plaster mold from each of the solid dish models. I cut a clay slab to the correct size using a pattern, and then pressed the clay into the mold, trimmed away the excess, and filled in the feet. I applied the color slip while the clay was still in the plaster mold, since the water in the slip would cause the clay to soften and possibly deform. The base coat of colored slip was applied before adding texture, so the texture would still be crisp and not get filled with slip. The texture is added to the outer edges of the eating surface. The texture of my roulette was created by pressing in dried barley and chickpeas, and the result resembles a mezzotint. The second color is lighter, and it's applied with a sea sponge over the entire dish, with the lightest application in the center. The third color is the lightest, and it is dry brushed over the textured area, so there's a gradation of color from the center of the plate to its edges. After the plate is removed from the mold, the outside edge is cut freehand, so each plate has a unique shape. Oops, sorry, I went too fast. All the surfaces that do not have colored slip are gently burnished to ensure a smooth surface. You can also see the shape of the feet in this last photo. They look like hills and have the same curves as the outer edge of the dish. And they also provide the function of allowing water to drain away when the dish is placed in a drying rack or dishwasher. After bisque firing, the surfaces that will not be glazed are wet sanded to ensure a smooth surface that feels like a river stone. Clear glaze is applied over the areas with colored slip, and the dishes are fired again to cone 6, which is over 1200 degrees Celsius. The result of the mentorship was a series of work where there's a full integration of artistic vision and functionality, and this was a milestone for me. The mentorship shortened the time it takes to develop a new body of work. Having the support of a mentor and the other mentees helped me to stay on track throughout the repeating process of experiment and refine, experiment and refine. There was also a cross-pollination of ideas that helped feed my creativity. If not for the mentorship, it would have taken me a few more years to get to the milestone of creating Hill and Dale dinnerware. Thank you for listening, and I'm happy to answer your questions during the Q&A period. I'm just going to turn things over now to Aneela Diaz de Souza.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I'm so grateful to the gardener and especially to Adeline for all their support, to Fusion and Barbara for creating an opportunity for artists to continue on their creative quests, but especially to Angelo di Petta and my fellow artists for the last 2 years. It has been a voyage, sometimes through really rough waters. But I'm so grateful for the support I've received, and I'm so happy to share my journey with you here today. This first piece is a piece I made in 2008 while I was at the tail end of my year at Sheridan College as a mature student. I was a newcomer to Canada, and this work described everything I was experiencing. Interestingly enough, I have been able to relate to this piece often, perhaps because it holds a familiar feeling, a truth that I have known as an artist all along, but only just begun to accept 2 decades later. This piece speaks to the need for silence and a space to contemplate while being inundated by everything that surrounds us. If I could personify this feeling of constant creative frustration, I would welcome her into my studio as a studio mate. She doesn't dishearten me anymore. She agitates me to propel me forward. Since 2010, my sculptural work has described themes of migration, change, and loss. I find inspiration in the animal world, particularly arthropods that shed their exoskeletons. This process of leaving behind what is familiar to prepare for the next life stage. The shell that is left behind holds a past life, experiences, treasured memories. I could draw a parallel between these creatures and my experiences as an immigrant. While hand building these sculptures, it offered me the time, the ability, and the mechanism to think through these emotions and to process them. Simultaneously, I have been producing functional wheel-thrown pottery, which offers me a shift in mental space. I return to learn skills, and I have the opportunity to develop this muscle intelligence with every new lump of clay. Functional objects offer me the ability to engage with the material in a different way. I think that unlike with sculpture, the functional object is not an end in itself. It can exist without announcement, but comparatively, its voice is active in an intimate way, in that it has the ability to engage consistently through handling, storing, containing, washing, and perhaps even breakage. These objects offer me a place as a maker to enter a stranger's home and become part of their daily existence. These two main aspects of my studio practice kept me reasonably occupied, creating without disrupting the comfort zone that I constructed for myself. In 2018, I was invited to a month-long residency in Kecskemét, Hungary. More than an invitation, this was an opportunity to place myself in discomfort and move outside of familiarity. Play became front and center, an activity I didn't offer myself as a working artist. In the 1 month, I allowed myself to try and fail, learn and engage, question, and look at the limitations that I was creating for myself. Mostly, I returned to exploring this medium that I passionately love, and to treat it like a new toy, to see what it could do. The materiality of clay has always intrigued me, and I explored its possibilities through a few experimental processes. I got to try out Heron porcelain, which has this beautiful translucency, and it offered a new experience for a stoneware potter. I used food as burnout material to describe childhood memories of my mother's kitchen. The grain and seed left their mark, existing only as vestiges. And these pockets of light that shine through the clay offer an almost emotional resonance to a special moment in the past. During the process of embedding the grain and lentils in the fine slabs of clay, I found that the environment was perfect for them to germinate. I ended up using this as a living slab of clay to display the final work. I think it speaks to yet another material aspect of our humble clay, the ability to nurture and offer life. In this piece, created towards the end of my residency at the International Ceramic Center, I got into the plaster room and I created a mold to slip cast these small objects in porcelain. I used stoneware, wood-fired stoneware as additional components. The slip casting process was something that I had only briefly touched upon in the past. For the final exhibition, instead of having these pieces within the gallery, I placed them in the courtyard outside for the audience to discover, almost like a treasure hunt. In my statement, I urged the viewer to consider the details of the spaces amidst finding these objects, to slow down and contemplate the spaces in between, and everything that it holds, the sights, the sounds, the smells, the light. The installation helped me see these rather small pieces as a vehicle to engage a larger space and instigate movement and experience outside of a gallery setting. If anything, this 1 month was a teaser. I came back seduced by the idea of exploration, impassioned and motivated, but I had a reality to deal with that included teaching and deadlines, shows, customers, and everything else that goes with being an artist. Once again, I could mentally reconnect to that first piece that I showed you. Fusion's Creative Directions program with Angelo di Petta came at the perfect time when I needed to expand as an artist. This opportunity offered me discomfort in a safe space. Angelo asked simple but painfully crucial questions which prompted deep, hard thinking about what is meaningful to me. On the inspiration boards we were asked to create, I noticed a pattern of circles and spirals and forms that were tactile, connected, invited touch, or just begged to be held. I reflected on what held the most meaning for me. And with much introspection, I realized it was my connections to people. This desire to connect found its way in my work. Through simple contact, the user is able to connect with an object and in many ways connect with the maker. The bottoms of my pots are often purposefully rounded and unglazed with the intention of creating as much surface area as possible to engage touch, almost like a hug. We needed to come up with an object or a set of objects for the final exhibition. The idea for this work came about while observing my own family gatherings. I paid close attention to the instances when people engaged the most. I found the greatest interactions took place over libations, either before or after a meal. At its best, there exists wise counsel, nurturing of ideas, views exchanged, humor, curiosity, and communication on so many levels. And I decided that these were the moments I needed to elevate with the addition of a handmade object to encourage those affirmative connections. The cups, which are varied in height and width, are meant to sit together closely. They are slip cast and deliberately lightweight to increase the sense of fragility when handled. Perhaps a tactile suggestion that these moments are transient. I like the idea of people coming together to pick a sipping cup from a common base, perhaps a reminder that we're all connected. At about this time, we were all negotiating a new way of life in 2020, and I shared the heightened need to look after and protect what was important. This is perhaps what led me to become obsessed with the idea of a nest for the base. Many tests and trials later, I came up with my minimalistic version of a nest, which is thrown and altered. I understand that my work might only exist as objects in a room, but my hope is that on some level, my considerations will have an effect. I hope that when people engage with these delicate cups, it will prompt them to reflect on the ephemerality of the moment that they are in and the people that they are connecting with. The cups, when positioned on the base, offer a sense of entities that are physically different but share a common source. The series of work called Incubate is about creating an opportunity that prioritizes human connections, giving importance to those meaningful interactions that we took for granted until they were no longer possible. I regard people and these moments as fragile and valuable, and I desire to preserve them as preciously as eggs in a nest. The Creative Directions program with Angelo has been an exercise in thinking. It has helped me to stop, dissect an idea, introspect, and grow from there with an authentic voice. It has been humbling and liberating at the same time, and I look forward to what lies ahead. With that, I would like to welcome Hana Balaban-Pommier, who will describe the last 10 years since completing the program with Angelo di Petta. Welcome, Hana.
Thank you, Aneela. Let me just share my screen and set up. And okay, so I was fortunate to be a participant of the first mentorship program that was organized by Fusion, started in 2011 and was running for 8 months. It was quite a big program. We had 2 groups of 10 artists each. One group was led by Bruce Cochran and one by Angelo di Petta. And that's the one that I was participating in. Those two groups were working in a parallel, each with their individual mentor. And then we came together for an exhibition in Ontario Craft Council, which now is Craft Ontario, in their gallery space on Queen Street in August 2012. Okay. So big shout out to my colleagues from the first mentorship group. We were very diverse group of 10 artists. So people came from all over Ontario, from as far as Ottawa, London, Kingston, Waterloo, as far as Deep River. So that shows you the dedication that this group was showing to the process. So the artists were not only diverse from geographically, but also as makers. There were people from different paths. Some were pure sculpture artists, some were very functional artists. And as Angelo later admitted, he put together this group very deliberately. So there is multitude of different perspectives and different experiences. And in the first meeting, it was a long one, and we did have an opportunity, each of us, to present our work that was there before we went to the mentorship. And we were also talking about our goals, and goals were very important. We were aware we did not have a whole amount of time. 8 months seems like a long time, but once the process starts rolling, it actually comes by very quickly. And Angelo also gave us presentation on principles of design, which really helped. He really utilized his long experience as a design teacher and passed on some very important information for me personally. All the subsequent meetings, we were presenting our projects for discussion with the group, and Angelo's role was supportive, was bringing up points that we might have missed, but the emphasis was really on that group process, the group critique, the feedback, the constructive, and also a group encouragement. We also were involved in preparing the exhibition, and we were coming up with not only ideas, but also reflecting on the process and reflecting in writing. And those thoughts were then published in the catalog that came out of that exhibition. And that was also an important process for me. So in my work before mentorship, I already started to turning away from function. I was exploring porcelain clay, but mainly I liked its surface qualities. So these vessels were wheel thrown, and they were also carved and burnished, but they were low fired. So in my goal for the mentorship, I was hoping to further explore porcelain properties. And I really like to think about the concepts of weight and weightlessness. And I wanted to create depth, and I was thinking about volumes and contrasts between light and dark. And so at the beginning, we were encouraged to experiment a lot. So these are some of my initial explorations, and some of them, like the one on the left upper corner, were in a solid porcelain clay. The rest of those, I took a porcelain slip, and I was just playing, using it in various ways. So the lower right corner, and lower left corner, both where the porcelain slip dipped paper in the slip and then molded into supports, into molds, and dried. So it was a slip on top of paper. And in the left corner and in the middle, was a slip trailing. So I actually used a little bit of paper in the slip itself, and I used a syringe and started to trail. Now, ultimately, this was the technique that I chose because it reminded me, I think it was a correspondent to my discovered love of drawing. I really, really enjoyed making marks on paper and drawing lines. And this was the way how to transfer it into clay. So these were my resulting pieces for exhibition of the Ontario Craft Council, now Craft Ontario Gallery. I took inspiration from my scuba diving trips. Utila is a place in Honduras where we were scuba diving that year. And I used the black stoneware as the anchor pieces for those slip-trailed, fragile, almost core-like, but not really formations. And I was really pleased with the way it turned out. So looking back, the mentorship really affected me in two different ways. So I started to explore this new direction of work that if I were left to my own devices, I would never had a courage to allow myself to experiment and to come up with something completely new, which I thought maybe was a little bit crazy at times. The second way how it affected me was that I was exposed to a completely new process of critical thinking. I never had formal education in clay. I was mainly functional potter. A lot of it was self-taught or through workshops. But this discourse, this evaluation, and being exposed to various ways of making, not only within the group, but within the knowledge that we then shared of different ways of working during the process, I really felt like I needed to know more and get further education. So as we were wrapping up the mentorship, I was already working on my application to the ceramics program for Sheridan College. And I started that in 2012, right in the fall. I was accepted into the second year, and I spent subsequent 2 years really delving into the clay. So in the first year of I was at Sheridan, we had a lot of different tasks, and it was different classes. The second year was more the year where I was able to direct my own learning, and as a senior student, and I picked up where I left off in the mentorship program and decided to explore more of this technique. So I was commissioned to do a small wall composition, and that gave me an opportunity to explore things like textures, rhythms, flow, also working in multiples, how to arrange multiples and compositions. I also started to look at color a little bit. So I used pigments and stains, and first I started with the body itself, but later I used the pigments in a spray on the top and left the body as it is. I started to layer the pieces because I wanted to see the interaction and give a bit more complexity. Now, one of the problems with my this method of working is that there is a lot of breakage. And I actually liked the broken pieces so much that I started putting them into sculptures, thought about them as my spatial drawings. And again, I was playing with contrasts of solids and textures and rhythm and movement. And I also played with scale. So this is a larger solid stoneware piece that is supported by the small fragile piece, so tension, scale. I also was using it, and it was towards the end of my Sheridan school, in a more personal work. So this was work based on a body form, and it was actually a mold made out of my torso. So I felt the torso, made the torso with the stoneware, first plaster of Paris, then stoneware mold. I filled the mold with these pieces, fired them, then very carefully took them and mounted them as wall pieces. So call them my body project. Again, the pieces were slip trailed. There, I started to use a little bit of glazes on the top. There were low fired glazes in the second firing. And the third piece in this project, I took the actual mold and I filled it up with all those broken pieces and used glaze, low-fired glaze, to hold it all together from the inside. So I also explored this a little bit from a different angle and explored surface qualities that this beautiful white porcelain had, and how it reflects light. And this was a project that I cooperated with my daughter, who's a video artist. I used her expertise, and I will show you the little video that we did. It was exhibited at the final year of the Sheridan College. So this is my recent work that has just been exhibited at the Gardener Shop at a feature exhibition. I spent several years of kind of working on the technical problems, mainly how to not have things break so much. I also decided to really explore color. It's like learning a new language for me. So I wanted to explore the layering, the color interactions. I'm really interested in emotional impacts of color. And I believe this is still something that will be in my future for next few years. So thank you to Fusion, the Gardner Museum, the Angelo, and this mentorship group for inviting me. For me, this whole mentorship experience was really transformative. And it was the first time I was exposed to critical thinking, different ideas, and I found it challenging but encouraging. And as in my catalog says, it was very transformative experience. And I still, after all those 10 years, I feel I have benefited tremendously, and I'm still not finished with exploring what I started 10 years ago. So thank you for watching. And now there will be an opportunity to ask questions.
Wow. That was fantastic. Thank you, everybody. Those are just fantastic presentations. I'm just kind of blown away by all the work and all the accomplishments and the magnificent thinking that went into all that. I have a nice question here. I have some questions to ask myself, and I hope that we can create a little dialogue amongst yourselves, as well as I'm sure if people have any more questions, please send them along. We'd be happy to answer them. This one comes from Kathleen Nicholson, who I think most of us know. She says, thank you for all your great presentations. How are you keeping that mentorship excitement and the idea exchange alive in today's practices? Aneela, take the floor.
Thank you, Kathleen, for your question. I think for me personally, it has to be a constant, right? It's so easy to get inundated by our daily studio practices, you know, meeting with deadlines and shows and creating the same work. But I think that for me, I have the pieces that I made, all the experiments that I made during the mentorship program out in front of me. And that for me is a callback. It's a time to stop and just sort of think about what I experienced and recreate that for myself. So whether it is keeping an observant eye or you know, taking maybe 30 minutes off to just play with the medium as opposed to demand from it. I think that's one way of me constantly reminding myself to keep engaged and ask questions and pursue sort of interests and experiments to keep that alive. That's what's been working for me.
Claire,
But I'm sure Hana has, she's had the last 10 years to remind herself.
Yeah, I don't know. This is very hard to keep that going off to 10 years. You know, it is. I found that during the Sheridan, I kind of built on everything that I had, and lasted me for some years, but now I'm actually enrolled in another mentorship because I almost need, after a few years, that reminder of the creativity and seeing things with the fresh eyes, because we just, and at least I tend to get into some kind of groove and rut and just think very narrowly. So I am in another mentorship, and I also have another educational opportunity lining up that I'll start in September. So it's kind of little post, like a graduate kind of level program that is online. So I would say that for me, I need that outside impetus, you know, to just to change the way I see things. So for me, education is a lot.
Yes,
okay, what about you, Claire?
Well, I think that for me, one of the reasons why I love working in clay is that unlike the other art disciplines that I have worked in before, there's this community that comes with it, because often people belong to a guild and they use these shared facilities. And so, you know, for me, going to my local guild and just, you know, making my things when there's this group of other people around to discuss things with, to see what they're working on, get inspired to try new techniques based on what you see someone else is trying. That's what really helps me. And the great thing about the mentorship that we've just completed is this group of people, they were so diverse that they, you know, each member brought something, different questions, different insights that really contributed to the whole group. And we're planning to continue to meet. Sometimes it's just online, you know, with, oh, this is what I'm working on. You know, what do you think I should do next? But we're also planning on doing some meeting as a group too. So I'm looking forward to that.
Those are great answers. I have a question here from Wendy Lowe. Thank you to the presenters. Very inspiring presentations. This is a more practical question. During the mentorship period, did you need to work solely on your project, or did you have time for other clay activities?
So the mentorship program, this one in particular, Fusion's Creative Directions program, was planned over the period of a year. So we all initially met, we had introductions. A lot of the artists we had never met before. So we meet and we sort of bring all our worlds together, and then we met consistently over the period of 10 months, I think it was. Of course, COVID kiboshed a lot of our plans, but we still managed to meet. And we sort of connected intermittently every 6 weeks or so to sort of propel us forward, to push us on, egg us on with what we were doing. And we would come back with ideas and inspirations, and then we started, zoning in on certain projects that we wanted to accomplish. And then we had insights and criticism that was all constructive to help us move along. So it wasn't a short period of time that we had only this to work on, because a lot of us have jobs and other responsibilities as artists. And so this was sort of something that was constantly there, sort of that we were working on in the background, and then coming together to meet and share and move forward on.
Anybody else want to make a comment about that?
No,
Hannah?
Aneela covered it.
Actually, I have a nice comment from Carolyn Bloomer. She says, beautifully expressed, and all of you speak to all of us. And thank you for the reminder to open yourself to others and seek challenges and to inject energy into your practices. I really do truly believe it's so inspirational to meet with other artists and share your ideas and thoughts. Well, of course, this is a question I feel like I have to ask under the circumstances of this past year. We started out with something that was supposed to last about a year or a little more than that, and it's almost taken us 2 years to complete it due to COVID and rescheduling and changing and shifting. But the obstacles in every artist's creative journey are real. Life comes along, you get presented with things that throw you in different directions than you anticipated. There's times when you just have to set your work aside and pursue other things that need attention. Family, which is a big one, and work for sure. So how do you feel, of course, the experience of COVID impacted your creative process, or that when you get obstacles and roadblocks, what's a great place to pick up the pieces and start again? Nicole, do you want to comment on that?
Sure. Yeah. Well, the COVID pandemic certainly slowed me down in regards to producing work, because I use shared studios and they were closed during the first lockdown. And then when they reopened, it was with limited access. But on a personal level, living in my bubble, it affected my sense of well-being. And there was a 3-week period actually where I was living alone, completely away from my family, because someone had gotten sick. And so we had to isolate. And that was a real low point. And what helped me get through that difficult time and some of the other periods over the entire pandemic was really connecting with other people. And when it comes to the creative process and getting back in the studio again, it was connecting with the other artists who were in the mentorship program with me. That helped to re-energize me to be able to get back at the work. I never stopped having ideas, but my energy level to actually execute them was the problem. The thing that helped was finding out that the pandemic was affecting all of us, not in the same way. And that was good to find out too. But when you talk about any like a sort of generic challenge, sometimes what I find interesting is if I can dig through old photos or boxes of work I've done before and rediscover something that I've done before that I completely forgot about. That can help kind of reignite my energy to get back in the studio. And I remember I wanted, like, the next thing I wanted to do with that was XYZ. I'm going to go and do it now.
Those are great comments. Anybody else want to comment on that one, or we had enough of COVID?
Well, I just wanted to quickly say, as a group, I think it was really beneficial to have each other for company, because we all had this sort of common goal that we had to reach completion with this project. And so as a small little community, we try to lift each other up and help each other to kind of keep going, to keep pushing forward. And yes, we were all in our little separate zones, sort of going through this, but we had this shared sense of community. For me personally, I think it was Angelo's sort of focus on the deadline, and that the ability to gather us back to say, we still have to focus on our deadlines. We still have a deadline to meet. So in lots of ways, it got me to set aside everything else that was going on and say, no, I need to focus on this. We have a deadline to meet, and I need to find a way to gather myself to create the work, or at least allow myself to go into the studio to produce something to keep moving forward towards achieving that goal. So I'm really grateful that we had Angelo to kind of egg us on this journey.
Yeah, so for me, I just started few months previous to COVID, we started a mentorship with Susan Lobeer, and we ran into a lot of difficulties. Some members were stuck abroad and people lost the studio. So we decided to put it on pause, and we are resuming now, and we're going to work on that from now on. For me personally, there were good things and there were bad things. After initial shock where I had to take my day planner and say cancel, 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 I realized how good it feels actually not to have to do anything, not to have anything in plan. And but what was really important for me then, when Adeline gave me the opportunity to put together this feature exhibition, because I could work through the winter, I was really trying to think of positivity. I was really trying to think of spring, you know, I was looking at spring colors. So I was trying to just put some positive note and smile on in this like really difficult time.
Right.
I was missing my family and everything else. So that helped me a lot.
Great. I'm glad you guys succeeded through that. A couple more questions and we're running out of time. Andy Bird wants to know, describe your experience working and learning from critiques. How do you develop a thick skin? Maybe Aneela, you can make one comment on that, and then I'll get I'll go to Nicole to see if she can, Claire, sorry, if you can answer the next question.
I think that you inherently have to be open to critique. I think being open and vulnerable and able to accept just helps you grow as an artist. It's not about growing a thick skin. That has its benefits, but I think allowing yourself, and in this case, in a safe space, to be open to that critique is crucial to growing as an artist.
Claire, here's one for you. Thank you to everyone for your wonderful insights. This comes from Susan Card. It's always so inspirational to hear the story behind the resulting body of any work. My question is, do you find the deadline of working towards a public exhibition, I would think like Cultivate, is it the strongest incentive to push your work forward, or is there something else?
I think that what happens initially when I have a show coming up is I think I have to make something completely new that I've never done before, so that you know, there's this reason for having another show. The problem is, especially with ceramics, when you try to do something new, that's when disasters happen.
Right.
You know, that's when the glaze does, you know, cracks and falls off the clay body. That's when the colors don't turn out the way they're supposed to. Glazes run and the pieces are permanently affixed to the kiln shelf. You know, so there's this balance between, I need to do something as tried and true, you know, at least materials and technique wise, when I have a show coming up, so I don't go insane because of all the things that can go wrong. And then on the other hand, okay, I need to innovate, I need something new. And so sometimes what I've done is I create timelines where I've got the shows here, and then I count
Yeah.
backwards. And there's this point of no return date where it's like, okay, innovation, experimentation stops on this date,
Yeah.
and
No, you do have to sort of set up parameters, and you really have to.
yeah.
But deadlines sometimes give you that push.
Yes, but they're also a hindrance because
Both
I
are
would keep innovating if I didn't have that deadline. You see,
Yeah.
so the answer is, that's a great question, Susan.
It is.
The answer is it's both.
Exactly.
I just want to quickly add there that I can plan as much in advance as possible. Like with this mentorship program, we plan and plan and plan and plan. We had an idea in mind that we wanted to kind of see on the table at the end of the day. And my best ideas come to me only under pressure, unfortunately. So even though I had all this time, my best idea came at the very last minute. So
Who knows? Bit of both. All right, one more question. We're going over time here. Wonderful presentation. This comes from Danielle Skentos. I think you know her. Oh, and there's another one from Deep River, Eva Gallagher. Hang on. She asks, after completing the mentorship during COVID, what changes your practice do you see in yourself? And then she goes, have your priorities changed? That's what Danielle wants to know. Have your priorities changed from your work?
Hannah?
Sorry, Hannah, we'll ask Hannah that one.
Okay, so it has, definitely, right? Because I just became way more experimental. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not afraid to experiment. Well,
Yeah.
if I did not go through that mentorship, I would play everything safe.
Yeah, nothing's too precious.
Nothing's, and now I am very comfortable with hammer, very comfortable with loss, very.
Excellent.
I'm not, yeah. So
I have to
lot changed.
I have to read you a comment from someone who lives in Deep River, who participated in the Keith Campbell mentorship up in North Bay. And her comment is, she loves the great presentations. Having taken 3 different mentorships, I found each one very rewarding. I hope Fusion will offer more, especially for those who live far away from Southern Ontario. That
Yeah.
comes from Eva Gallagher.
Yeah.
I guess we're over time here. Where's our Adeline? Are we good to go, or perhaps we should have a few closing remarks? Thank you to everybody. Honestly, I would really like to thank the Gardner Museum for all the work supporting that you do, clay artists and glass artists locally, nationally, around the world. Adeline, you have worked tirelessly to get this exhibition online and in that shop. And if you have time, everybody, please try and get in and see it. We're hoping that it'll open up even more. Thank you to all you artists that participated in the program. Those are very 2 challenging years, that's for sure. And to Angelo, who stayed focused, calm, and always available for everybody. Thank you to Fusion, Ontario Clay and Glass Association, and all of those. Like, it's not just Fusion, like Ontario Arts Council, Hamilton Guild. So many people have supported this program, and it would not happen without everybody's generosity. And lastly, a little bit of a thank you to Sylvana McKetty. She was a big supporter to me to make this program happen. So, and she's an artist in the group, and hopefully you'll hear from her soon. So,
And thank you to you,
everybody.
Barb. Thank you to
No,
you,
you're
Barb,
welcome.
too.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. I learned a lot myself, that's for
And-
sure.
If anyone
Bye.
needs to reach out to us, please feel free. We're all accessible. Feel free to ask questions. We can continue conversations. We're happy to interact with all of you. So thank you so much for your time.
Adeline, do you have some closing remarks?
Yes, I want to thank everybody for those who joined us for this artist talk, and I want to thank each and one of you guys from Fusion. You guys did an incredible job of putting it all together, and I know it's been a very trying over a year, but you guys pulled it through and it looks fantastic. And thank you, Barbara, for hosting this event. And I just want to thank you all. You guys are great. All right, thank you, everybody. And then join us for our next Artist Talk 2 on Wednesday, July 14th.